That's almost good enough fact to include in this video. There are 40 to 60 birds per person on the earth. Hi, read the recipe. In this video, I'll give short descriptions of the core cooking techniques. I want to keep this video kind of surface level, so for each technique I'm also going to include a link to a video that goes more into depth so that you can learn more. Basically, they're all different ways to apply heat, but if you think that makes them interchangeable, try boiling a pizza and get back to me. That's nasty. I'm not just talking basics, I'm talking pre-basics. Welcome to Cooking 99. Ah! Cooking techniques can basically be broken down to on top of a stove or in an oven. There are some that don't fit there, but most of them do. So let's start with on top of the stove. Sautéing is one of the most common techniques. It usually happens in a shallow pan on the stove over medium-high heat, like 7 or 8 out of 10, with a little bit of oil or butter in the pan. The goal is to cook the product quickly and to gain some color. The browning that occurs during sautéing not only brings out the flavor of the product, it also adds complexity to the flavor in the form of acids and caramelized sugars. With sautéing, 3 things are very important: heat level, timing, and how much product is in the pan. You don't want to, no, do not put so much product in the pan so that it's crowded. We want to let steam escape quickly from the pan. We don't want the steam coming from one piece to be cooking another and moistening it. That will lead to soggier food with less flavor. Steam reduces the amount of browning that you can achieve. Steaming is also the traditional way of preparing Jim's hawk soup. Okay, who's messing with the teleprompter? Okay, boiling. Pretty straightforward. The ingredient needs to be submerged in water, and big bubbles should be popping up from the bottom. Sometimes you start in cold water, like potatoes, and sometimes you start in hot water, like pasta. Simmering is the point just below boiling, and because that's hard to estimate, we actually bring the pot to a boil first and then lower the heat to 1 or 2, just enough to maintain those tiny bubbles. Steaming is done in a pot with usually about 1 inch of boiling water in it. You can use a steaming tray or bunched up aluminum foil to keep the food out of the water. Once the water is boiling, you can lower the heat to about medium to conserve some energy, but you want to maintain that rolling boil in the water. Steaming is a healthy and underrated way to cook most vegetables that preserves flavor and nutrients. It's also a great way to cook fish, as long as you don't overcook it. I like to finish steamed vegetables or fish with some olive oil or butter, salt and pepper, and a squeeze of lemon. Stewing is when you cook something in a liquid, low and slow. It lets the proteins break down and things usually come out very tender. Baking happens in the oven, usually between 300 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'll need to preheat the oven, so let that be the first thing you do. For most foods except for cakes, I recommend turning the food around about halfway through because most home ovens are hotter in some spots, usually towards the back. But don't open the oven more often than you need to, it lets heat out. Roasting is pretty much the same thing as baking, but at higher temperatures, around 400 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. This helps achieve a good amount of color on the outside. Another difference between roasting and baking is just in the context. Like I wouldn't say roast your cookies at 400 degrees. So it depends a little on what you're cooking. Slow roasting is very similar to baking and roasting, except it's usually done at 300 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, and for a longer amount of time. It's the dry version of stewing. Broiling. Broil is a setting on your oven that gives you very high heat from above. This is good for browning and crisping. Those are the main ones. Here are a few more cooking techniques that you'll see crop up from time to time, and I'll just say a few words on each. Grilling is when you have high, dry heat from the bottom. It's usually over open flame. It's good for searing when the top is off, and it's more like baking when the top is on. Sweating is when you gently sauté vegetables or aromatics to start to break them down and remove some moisture to concentrate their flavor. It usually happens at the beginning of a recipe. Blanching is when you submerge a product in boiling water for about a minute before removing it into an ice bath. And that little move is called shocking, and it stops the product from overcooking. Basting is when you take the drippings from the bottom of a roasting pan with a baster, a spoon, or a heat-resistant brush and apply it to the outside of your product. Ooh, that looked good. To encourage browning and flavor development. Poaching. Poaching is kind of like similaring. Poaching is similar to simmering, but at a lower temperature for a longer time.
Takeaways.
Okay, in review, these are not the only cooking techniques. There are others like smoking, cooking confit, or sous vide. Okay. But this list is comprehensive enough to include all the techniques you would need to use for almost any basic recipe. All right, speaking of recipes, read them. Bye. With a little bit of oil or butter. I did that when I was reading before. Butter. It's butter. Basting. Thanks for sticking around. I don't need you to subscribe or smash that like button, but I do want to answer any questions you have, so please stick them in the comments section. We'll respond to as many as we can. We also plan on doing a Q&A at some point, so if a question gets brought up enough, we'll also stick the answer in that video. Please comment away.